At the heart of this tragic tale were the Martins, a seemingly ordinary family living in the coastal town of Seaview Heights. This family opened their doors to a stranger, the biggest mistake they could ever hope to make, and the result was beyond devastating. Trust was broken, lives were lost, but the scariest part of all was that the perpetrator almost escaped without being punished by the law. Seaview Heights was a small town known for its charming lighthouses and serene beaches, but this town would soon be rocked by a scandal that would forever stain its reputation. The Martins, comprising Peter, his wife Emily, and their three beautiful young children, Max, Carrara, and 3-year-old Betty, seemed to display the ideal description of a perfect family. However, beneath the surface of their somewhat perfect life, dark secrets and forbidden desires were brewing. Peter Martin, a successful real estate agent, was known for his charisma and good looks, while his lovely wife Emily, a dedicated school teacher, was the epitome of grace and kindness. She was adored by her students and respected by her colleagues. They lived in a beautiful house overlooking the ocean, and to be honest, this couple seemed to have it all, a successful and happy life. But as the pressures of work and family life mounted, cracks began to form in their marriage. Now let's introduce someone very important in this story. Chloe Turner, a college student who had recently moved to Seaview Heights. It was a warm, breezy afternoon when Chloe Turner first set foot in the town. The serene atmosphere and picturesque views had drawn her here. The air was pure, and the streets were not so noisy. Everything was just different from the bustling city life she was accustomed to. Chloe was a college student with big dreams and a determined spirit, eager to start fresh in this beautiful town. One day, while wandering the charming streets and admiring the quaint shops and historic buildings, Chloe noticed a for-sale sign in front of a beautiful oceanfront property. Intrigued, she approached the house, hoping to get a closer look. As fate would have it, Peter Martin was there conducting a showing for a potential buyer. Peter noticed Chloe standing by the gate, and with his characteristic charm, walked over to greet her. He asked with a friendly smile if she was interested in the house. Chloe, slightly taken aback by his sudden approach, quickly composed herself and retorted that she was just admiring the beautiful view, complimenting the house as a lovely property. Peter nodded, his professional instincts kicking in. He began introducing himself and told her he was the real estate agent handling this sale. He mentioned that if she ever needed help with properties around here, she should feel free to reach out. They chatted for a few more minutes, discussing the town, the house, and Chloe's recent move. As their conversation flowed naturally, Chloe casually mentioned her search for a job, stating she had been desperately seeking one, and since she was new to this small town, nobody trusted her enough to give her a job. She asked Mr. Martin if he knew anyone who could offer her a part-time job to support her finances for college. Peter's interest was piqued. He recalled that his wife Emily was always looking for help with their children and around the house. He told Chloe that his wife was a school teacher and things could get pretty hectic. He then asked for her contact information, promising to talk to his wife and see if they could arrange something. Chloe's eyes lit up with gratitude, and she thanked Mr. Martin for even considering her. Later that evening, Peter brought up the conversation with Emily over dinner. He explained how he had met Chloe and her situation. Emily, always compassionate and understanding, agreed to meet with Chloe. From the way her husband described the young woman, she sounded like a nice person, so Emily asked Peter to invite her over for dinner that weekend to see if she would be a good fit. Chloe was thrilled when she received the call from Emily. She visited the Martins' home, and after a warm and welcoming interview, was hired to help with the children and assist Emily around the house, offering Peter and Emily some much-needed respite from their demanding schedules. Chloe, with her bright smile and carefree spirit, quickly became a beloved figure in the household. The children adored her, and Emily appreciated the help. But for Peter, Chloe represented something more dangerous, an escape from the monotony of his life. At first, Peter's attraction to Chloe was a guilty secret, something he barely acknowledged even to himself. He admired her youth and vitality, qualities that seemed to be fading from his own wife and his own life. Chloe, for her part, simply enjoyed the attention of the handsome and successful Peter. She found his maturity and confidence appealing. This was very different from the boys her own age, who were increasingly trying to get into her pants. Before long, their interactions, initially innocent, grew increasingly charged with unspoken desire. They both knew it was just a matter of time, and one day it finally happened. The affair began one sultry summer evening when Emily was attending a teachers' conference out of town. The sun had set, and Peter and Chloe found themselves alone in the house after the children had gone to bed. The rhythmic sound of the waves crashing against the shore provided a soothing backdrop as they settled in the cozy living room. While casually discussing life, they decided to share a bottle of wine. Peter poured 2 glasses of the rich red wine, and they clinked their glasses in a casual toast. The conversation started lightly, but as the wine flowed, so did their words. Chloe, with her captivating blue eyes and infectious laughter, began to open up to Peter. She spoke of her struggles with college, balancing coursework, part-time jobs, and the pressure of expectations. Her dreams of a future where she could escape the confines of her current life and make something truly meaningful of herself were shared with a raw honesty that touched Peter deeply. Feeling the effects of the wine in the intimate setting, Peter found himself sharing more than he usually would. He talked about his career, how despite his success, he felt a gnawing dissatisfaction. The passion he once had for real estate had dwindled, replaced by the monotonous grind of daily work. He confided in Chloe about his fading connection with Emily, the woman he once adored, now seemingly distant and preoccupied with her own life and career. As the night wore on, the conversation took on a more personal and intimate tone. Peter and Chloe's eyes locked more frequently, their gazes lingering a bit too long. The atmosphere grew heavy with unspoken desires and forbidden thoughts. Chloe shifted closer to Peter, her knee brushing against his, sending a shiver down his spine. He could smell the faint scent of her perfume, and the delicate floral fragrance began to fill the space between them. Peter felt a magnetic pull toward Chloe, a young woman who represented everything he felt he was missing: youth, spontaneity, and an untapped passion for life. Their first kiss was hesitant, a sign that they were crossing over into forbidden territory. Peter leaned in slowly, his heart pounding in his chest. Chloe's breath hitched as their lips met. Yes, they kissed, a kiss that spoke volumes of their suppressed desires. It was a brief, stolen moment filled with the electricity of new and forbidden attraction. Once that line was crossed, there was no turning back. The kiss quickly escalated into a heated embrace. Their bodies pressed together as they explored this new connection. The room seemed to disappear, leaving only the two of them in a bubble of intense, unbridled passion. They stumbled toward the couch, hands fumbling, hearts racing as they gave into the lust that had been simmering beneath the surface for weeks. Their affair quickly escalated, fueled by a combination of lust and a desire for something more than their current lives offered. It was a dangerous game they were playing, one that promised pleasure, but threatened to destroy everything they held dear. But in that moment, neither Peter nor Chloe cared about the consequences. They were consumed by a desire that burned brighter than the summer sun setting over Seaview Heights. Peter and Chloe's secret meetings became a regular occurrence, each escapade more daring than the last. They met in the house when Emily was out, at motels on the outskirts of town, and even in the secluded corners of Seaview Heights' picturesque parks. Each encounter was a mix of passion and peril, the thrill of their illicit relationship overshadowing the reality of their betrayal. They became so skilled at this that Emily had no idea something so horrible was going on in her house. But even though they were good at hiding it, they could not keep it concealed forever. One afternoon, while Emily was out running errands, their oldest son Max felt a bit sick and came home early from school. He quietly entered the house, heading to his room to drop off his backpack. As he passed the living room, he heard muffled voices. Curious, he peeked around the corner and saw his father and Chloe locked in a passionate embrace. Shocked and frightened, Max backed away, but Chloe noticed him. She called out his name sweetly, her tone betraying the anger in her eyes, and asked him to come over for just a moment. What did she plan to do? Peter must have wondered, feeling shame and deep regret. Terrified, Max hesitated, telling her he needed to go to his room, and he quickly turned to leave. But Chloe was faster. She grabbed him by the arm, her grip like iron. This time around, her once calm and soft demeanor switched to one that was very dangerous. She threatened him, insisting he should not dare tell anyone about this. If he did, Chloe chillingly threatened to murder him if he spoke about this to anyone. Peter was dumbfounded and shocked, trying to signal to Chloe that maybe she had taken this too far. But her facade of kindness was slipping. Max nodded, his eyes wide with fear. He tried to pull away, but Chloe's grip tightened. She demanded that Max promise to keep quiet. Max, being an innocent child, quickly agreed, tears streaming down his face. Satisfied, Chloe released him, and he fled to his room. Days turned into weeks, and the tension in the house grew palpable. Emily sensed something was terribly wrong, not just with Peter, but with Max as well. He had become withdrawn and anxious, avoiding eye contact and speaking in hushed tones. Emily's concern deepened, but Max refused to confide in her. Meanwhile, Chloe's threat to their son seemed to have ignited a light bulb of common sense in Peter. He began wondering if this was all worth it. He started planning how he would tell his wife about the whole issue so they could work together to kick Chloe out of their lives. But he just couldn't bring himself to do it. Emily began to notice even more devastating changes in Peter. He became more distant, his affection for her seeming forced. His late nights at the office and sudden business trips raised her suspicions, but she dismissed them, attributing his behavior to stress. It wasn't until one evening, when a loud noise shattered the calm, that the true horror began to unfold. Emily was away with the kids at her mother's house, and one of the neighbors, Mrs. Caldwell, rushed over to the Martins' house, her heart pounding. She had no idea what she would find, but feared the worst. The sight that greeted her was more gruesome than she could have imagined. Peter Martin lay motionless in a pool of his own blood, his eyes lifeless and body still. Mrs. Caldwell let out a piercing scream that reverberated through the entire neighborhood, and before long, people gathered to know what happened. The shock spread quickly through the neighborhood, and soon detectives and investigators descended upon the Martin household, determined to uncover the truth behind Peter's untimely death. That same night, Emily and the kids had to rush home when the police informed Emily that her attention was needed at home, saying something had happened to her husband. They refused to let her know any more information, driving her to madness. She quickly put her kids in the car and drove at extremely high speed for over 3 hours just to find out what had happened. She kept dialing her husband's phone as she drove, but there was no answer. Fearing the worst, she called Chloe and asked if she knew anything about what had happened. Chloe claimed that there was a ruckus around the house, and the police also prevented her from entering. She further added that she had been out of town that day and just came in to see what was going on. Emily finally arrived and immediately saw her husband's lifeless body. Forensics were still trying to figure out the cause of death, and she broke down. Why had this happened? Everybody loved Peter. Even those who were somewhat jealous of his life didn't hate him. Who would do this? The police allowed her to have a moment before asking if there was anyone she thought could be responsible for this. But nothing came to her mind. Peter was an almost perfect man, a wonderful husband, and the best father. He was charismatic but kind, and he would always help whoever needed help. She couldn't think of anyone who would want to murder Peter. They also questioned Chloe, and she, with tears in her eyes, told them she was out of town because she had a test to write. When they called the college to find out if Chloe was present for the test, her alibi checked out. They asked Max, the oldest of the kids, if he knew anything that could help them find out his father's killer, but Max said he knew nothing. He was already burdened with the weight of his secret and grew even more despondent, haunted by the sight of his father's body, knowing deep down that Chloe had to be involved somehow. Every glance at her filled him with dread and anger, the memory of her threat echoing in his mind. Unable to bear the tension any longer, he decided to confront her one evening, while Emily was out trying to manage the overwhelming grief that consumed her life. Max found Chloe alone in the kitchen. The air was thick with unspoken words as he approached her, his heart pounding. "Why did you do it?" Max whispered fiercely, his eyes burning with a mix of fear and fury. "I know it was you. You killed my dad." Chloe's expression hardened, her eyes narrowing. She told Max that he had no idea what he was talking about. "Max, be careful with your accusations," she spat out. Max, determined and more courageous than ever, took a step closer, fists clenched at his sides. This time, he was the one issuing the threat. He told her to leave, and that if she didn't, he would tell his mother about the affair and everything he could. He couldn't bear to stand her. He wasn't sure if she was actually responsible for his father's death, but he couldn't stand the sight of her. In an instant, Chloe's demeanor changed from defensive to predatory. She lunged at Max, but he managed to evade her grasp and bolted toward the kitchen doorway. Driven by a mix of panic and rage, Chloe grabbed a knife from the counter and chased after him, her footsteps pounding against the hardwood floor. Max screamed as she caught up to him, the knife plunging into his shoulder, narrowly missing his vital organs. The pain was searing, but the terror was worse. He collapsed to the floor, blood oozing from the wound. His cry echoed through the house, and Chloe, realizing the gravity of her actions, fled in fear, dropping the knife. Max, bleeding and terrified, called out for his mother, who rushed out and ran to the phone to call the police and an ambulance for help. The police arrived quickly, their flashing lights shining brightly on the walls as they searched for Chloe, while Max was rushed to the hospital as he was losing blood rapidly. His life was now at stake, and Emily was in a dilemma. She could not lose both her husband and her only son. But it wasn't long before they found Chloe hiding in a darkened alleyway behind a row of shops, her face streaked with tears. Her mind was racing as she was brought in, her facade of innocence shattered under intense interrogation. Chloe confessed to murdering Peter, her voice cold and devoid of remorse as she recounted how Peter had ended the affair, telling her he couldn't continue and demanding she leave his life. He had threatened to confess everything to Emily and file a restraining order against Chloe, ensuring she would never find work in Seaview Heights again. Enraged and desperate, she had snapped. As Peter turned his back and walked away, she seized the opportunity and stabbed him, the knife plunging into his back as he fell to the floor. Emily was devastated. The revelation of her husband's infidelity was overshadowed by the unbearable loss of his life. She didn't care about the betrayal, she just wanted him back. But it was too late. The tragic sequence of events had irrevocably shattered the Martin family and left a permanent scar on the once serene town of Seaview Heights. Max, recovering from his wound, was plagued by nightmares of the night he confronted Chloe. He felt a crushing guilt for not having spoken up sooner, for not being able to prevent his father's death. Emily, struggling to hold her family together, could see the toll it was taking on him. She tried to reach out to offer comfort, but Max remained distant, his eyes haunted. The community, now aware of the dark secrets that had lurked beneath the surface of the seemingly perfect family, struggled to come to terms with the tragedy. The lighthouses and serene beaches, once symbols of peace and tranquility, now seemed to bear witness to the haunting tale of love, betrayal, and murder that would forever stain their reputation. Whispers of the Martins' downfall spread through the town, and to be honest, the only word we could use to describe this was unbelievable. Emily found herself drowning in grief, her once beautiful life shattered. She couldn't even bring herself to feel anger towards Peter for his betrayal. The loss of him was too overwhelming. She spent countless nights staring out at the ocean, its waves crashing rhythmically, a painful reminder of the life that had once been so full of promise. Chloe's trial became a focal point for the town, drawing curious onlookers and serious media attention. Her cold, calculated demeanor on the stand sent chills down the spines of those who watched. She showed no remorse as she described the events leading up to Peter's murder, her voice chillingly detached. Max, still grappling with his trauma, was called to testify, standing in the courtroom as he recounted the horrific night he had confronted Chloe. His voice trembled but remained resolute. His testimony painted a wicked picture of Chloe's true nature. As the trial drew to a close, the jury deliberated for only a short time before finding Chloe guilty of first-degree murder. Her sentence was swift and severe, bringing justice to the shattered Martin family. In the aftermath, Emily, Max, and her 7-year-old and 3-year-old daughters tried to piece their lives back together. The once beautiful home was now a place of painful memories, and Emily decided